Well, hey there, bird hunters. Hope you're doing well. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the Upland Social. It means a ton that you guys would tune in, that you'd listen, that you'd reach out, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and just tell me that you're enjoying the show. That just means a ton. I hope you're getting ready for bird season, that you got some good plans in the works for this fall. And speaking of which, when it comes to prepping and plans, I want to do something a little bit different this week. I brought in Kyle Kamp from Valley to Peak Nutrition to talk about exercise and nutrition for us as hunters. Kyle is a dietitian in the state of Idaho. He does a lot of big game hunting, but he also offers a lot of good information that we can use as well as bird hunters. As you and I both know, bird hunting can be very rigorous and demanding, and is very challenging from a physical standpoint. So if we can put the odds in our favor a little bit more to be physically fit, and to have some good nutrition on the front end, during and after, and to understand kind of the interplay of all those things, I think it's going to put us in a little bit better position for bird season. And if anything, just kind of give us some more confidence as well, whether we're up in the mountains or out on the plains, or trudging through a cattail slough in South Dakota. I think it's just a really good thing. So hope you enjoy this episode. Like I said, it's a little bit different. But I think there's a lot of good things that's going to be offered in this episode. And I'll also put in the show notes Kyle's website where you can find out about Valley to Peak Nutrition and get connected to him. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk soon. You're listening to the Upland Social, a podcast dedicated to the bird hunting community. I'm your host, Ryan Linton, an artist, writer, and lover of all things dogs and birds. We'll gear up and hit the field with some of the most engaging and compelling voices on the bird hunting scene. Each week, we will hear from seasoned hunters, dog trainers, storytellers, wild game specialists, to everyday uplanders just like you and me. Their insights, experience, and stories will inspire and equip you to explore, conserve, and celebrate the wild places we all love. The landscape is truly limitless. So load up, drop the tailgate, and let's go. This is the Upland Social. In December of 2008, 21-year-old Kyle Kamp weighed 270 pounds and experienced chest pains while opening Christmas presents. That moment sparked a major life change. Over the next year, he lost more than 140 pounds and became deeply invested in understanding nutrition and exercise. Frustrated by conflicting information online, Kyle pursued a degree in dietetics, completed his residency, and became a registered dietitian in Idaho. There, he discovered how proper nutrition fuels outdoor performance, especially in the mountains he grew to love. Kyle founded Valley to Peak Nutrition to cut through nutrition fads and misinformation. His goal is to deliver science-based guidance that helps people reach their physical and performance goals, especially in demanding outdoor pursuits. Kyle, it's great to have you today with us on the Open Social.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ryan. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh man, I'm so pumped about this episode and just diving into nutrition and exercise for us as hunters. So, I know I read a fair bit of information there just about you in the bio, but just give us a little more information about you, Kyle, and where you hail from as well.
The bio sums it up pretty well. We kind of talked before the podcast started. I'm from Southern Indiana, not too far from where you are, and we've actually got some connections that we didn't know about until about 20 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
But what landed me out here was my dietitian residency program. Initially when I got matched out here, because you basically have a computer that kind of tells you where you're going to go for the programs that are available in the US, you know, I, I didn't want to go for starters. And second to that, I had no real experience in the outdoors. At that point, I did have a dietetics degree and had, a pretty big interest in bat and ball type of sports, your typical basketball, soccer, football, and how nutrition played a role in those. But as far as what my career has been built around since then, I had no experience prior to coming out here. So yeah, moved my tail out here and have been here ever since. And obviously fell in love with it. Met my wife, and we have a uh, great life with great friends here, and it's where we live now.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that was pretty cool too, like you were saying, to find out we have some mutual friends or acquaintances at least, and have a little bit of overlap in our lives. But obviously, man, you've had this I've been following your work from afar for about a year and a half now, through, got acquainted with you, through listening to the, Mountain Tough podcast, when I was thinking about fitness and health, a while back and still am now to this day. But yeah, I wanted to have you on here. For us as bird hunters, I don't think there's a whole lot of information in the way of nutrition and exercise that not only preps us for what can be very physically demanding hunts, just like that you're used to with backcountry hunting in Idaho and Alaska that I know that you've done. I know you do some pretty extreme hiking in the Grand Canyon as well. And so I just wanted to help bring um, some more information, like I said, to us as bird hunters. I don't feel like there's a whole lot in the way of that. But like yeah, 2008, let's take us back and give us a little more, like, vivid detail of 2008 as much as you're comfortable with, of this this crazy weight loss journey that you experienced. I mean, that, um, people that are, of that size and of that weight, like, a lot of them never see such a radical change, I would imagine. And so, you lost 140 pounds, in roughly a year. Just give us a little more information on that. I know you said you were opening Christmas presents, you felt some chest pain, um, but what was it that you're like, "Man, I've gotta change this?" Was there a conversation you had with a doctor? Was there something like a vivid, experience beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'6", and my weight had been a part of my life my whole life. I'd always been heavy. I mean, from when I was a kid, clear up to that point, I'd get made fun of. I mean, I had friends still, and some, but still, you get all these comments, and so the gist of it is, it's not like it was oblivious to me that I was not in a good situation. It didn't take a lot of it didn't take some, earth-shattering physician conversation with a physician for him to be like, "Hey, you're not in great health," and me be like, "Ah, you're kidding me. I could have swore
Right.
based on my diet and the fact that I'm 140 pounds overweight that I was probably doing okay." But the physical aspect of it presenting itself like it did that Christmas morning, that was really visceral and sort of gave me this feeling of like, man, I've got to change something. And at that time, I had no medical background or anything like that, so I didn't understand what a lot of these doctors' reports were saying. But they'd throw words around about having high blood pressure and lab values that didn't look great for my age, and you know. For all you know, it's like, yeah, those pants don't fit you that great, but they'll do. You sort of look at reports like that when you're that age and no context, no background, and you don't know what that really means at the time. Now, thankfully, equally thankfully at the time, the internet still really wasn't that big. That it was new, for the most part, but there really wasn't that much information out about it, and people were using it for it was like the very beginning of MySpace, and Facebook was still only for college emails, and so there wasn't a lot of information, but what I remember was I would watch this show called The Biggest Loser. Now, I'll preface this whole story by saying a lot of the advice on that show was very poor, but at the time it was the information I had available to me. And so I used some of the information from books they had written on this show to create this thing called a calorie deficit. And so over time, yeah, I began to change what I ate, and I started really small with really small adjustments, like not getting a fried entree when I would go to eat. Instead of getting a fried entree, I'd begin drinking water instead of sodas. I wouldn't get the large French fry. I'd get the small. I wouldn't eat the whole pizza. I'd eat half. I didn't have, when I first started this, these big changes. I just did what seemed sensible to me. And, I like anything, when you start seeing some positive feedback from what you're doing, it only encourages you to keep going. And I'm a very inquisitive person as it is anyway. And so I was really wanting to, kind of know, well, man, if these changes are producing that, what would the next level look like? What if I
Mhm.
started to make my own food? What if I really started to get this nutrient called protein that everybody suggested I get? What happens if I exercise with it too? Right. And so each of these steps just dove me deeper in wanting to know more to where I started consistently doing all of these things at the same time. And of course, not going to be surprised anybody who listens to this. That's where it really propelled the weight loss to, 80 pounds lost, 100 pounds lost, 120 pounds lost, 140 pounds lost. Now at that same time, and this is a part of part of the story that I've really not shared a lot about, not knowing a lot about nutrition and following a very extreme method through kind of what The Biggest Loser had done at the time, I'd actually gone to the opposite end where I had lost so much weight that I found myself in this state of almost being unhealthy again. No energy, losing hair, couldn't wake up, just a lot of like big problems. So I ended up gaining intentionally 15 pounds from my lowest weight because of that. And that's kind of been, where I've been ever since. And, that whole process is what led me to my career because the only thing that I wanted to do then was take what I had learned and help other people. And so, moved to Idaho, completed my dietetic program, and worked at a hospital for a number of years here, helping run coordinate a outpatient program, working inpatient, and then Valley to Peak, which is our nutrition program that we've got now, sort of came by accident, and it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing to the point of where, right when we found out we were pregnant with our second son, I was working both of those full time, and I couldn't do that. I mean, it was killing me. So had just this may be a deeper story than you want, but had just lost my dad. And, that whole reality of realizing how short life is made me say, I'm never going to get the opportunity again to try to take this full time. And so we did. That was over 4 years ago that I started doing just this full time, and it's been awesome. Been a huge blessing ever since, and we love it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, um, I was just listening to my friend the other day, and he said, I if an opportunity presents itself for you to do the thing that you wanna do, you just find a way to say yes, and it sounds like with Valley to Peak, that's, you said, like, that it's gonna be now or never, basically, and, so you just made it work and found a way to say yes, and, I can personally say, at least from afar with the podcast that you put out, I've definitely benefited from, a good amount of information that you've given, and what I love too, what you do, Kyle, is that you put things in such a realistic way for, whether it's someone that actually hires you out for your program, or there's just free information that's offered by your podcast, is that, um, it's very approachable, and done in such a way of, like, humility as well, where it's, like, not like, "I've got, like, the secret sauce or the magic bullet, for your weight loss." I think a lot of it seems like, at least, I'm not a dietitian, and I'm not, like, in the nutritional world by any means, to the degree that you are, but you pull up something on YouTube of, like, how to the 15 best foods to eat, whatever, and it always just seems like there's just such a jarring, like, shock factor almost that person, that influencer wants to give you of, like, "This is the reason, like, why these are the only foods that will work and why and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button." It just kinda feels like a sell, I guess, a lot of times, and I never get that impression with you, and, which just keeps me coming back for more, to "Well, I just wanna let's see what Kyle has to say about this," you know?
Yeah.
And so even, like, your approach in your weight loss, I think that's, you approached it in a way where it wasn't like a rocket launch into space, but it was kinda more like an airplane taking off where you said, like, "Okay, instead of fried, I'm gonna get the grilled option," or instead of, like, a large fry, I'm gonna get a small fry, and it was these incremental steps that a lot of times doesn't seem like a whole like a giant change to us. But over time, it's a massive change that culminates, like, in, like, 1,000 decisions, that to the point, like, where over, 365 days, year and a half, whatever, like, you lost, man, like, an entire person, basically, really small person, and it has completely changed and, reshaped, like, kinda your future and what you're doing now into the point like where this is like a full-time career for you. So, no, I definitely appreciate you going in to detail about that. So, I do want to talk about how you moved from Indiana. You and I both know what it looks like here, and it does have its own beauty, right? But you moved to a totally different landscape in Idaho. I want to hear about that shift from Southern Indiana kid that I don't know how involved you were in hunting and the outdoors and that kind of stuff at that point to this outdoor playground of Idaho, and these massive mountains and just this endless beauty, and it's rich with, abundant with game. What was kind of that switch for you where now you're not just, losing weight and getting into, like, a whole lot better shape, but you're gonna take that fitness into the mountains as well?
Yeah, there was no shift because I had no intention of doing that at all. And I think that's something else that makes my story really unique is, I didn't grow up in a household that had any real focus on health or outdoors at all. I mean, so, I'll tell you about the exposure there, but coming out here, to become a dietitian, you apply to different places and then programs express interest in you. And if there's a match there where you're interested in a program and a program's interested in you, the computer sees that, and there's other things that are involved there, and then you go. And so my mom had moved out here a long time ago. So the idea of being out here and a part of the outdoors was foreign to me. I didn't put the two together at all. Coming out here though, what had happened was I met my wife after about 5 months of being here, and she's from Eastern Oregon. Her dad's a logger, they come from a logging family, they're basically their entire existence is on wild game and their garden, and, they live this rural lifestyle, not because it's cool or documented. In fact, he wouldn't be caught dead with any kind of social media. They lived it because they loved it. It's what they've always known, and part of that is because of where they live, and it's just easier and more budget friendly to live that kind of a lifestyle. So I noticed that when I would go to visit them, which we did quite a bit, like every meal was wild game, and so I had this interest in nutrition and a love, and still to this day love cooking, and I'm watching my in-laws produce all of this food that they've grown, and there's always been an innate sense of interest in me to be self-sufficient. But, for anyone who's listening or anyone who's had to go this road on their own, the gap between no prior exposure and not growing up in it to becoming successful in it is huge if you don't have someone to sort of take your hand and teach it to you. It's not an insurmountable gap, but it is a significantly long road. And, this idea of being successful in the woods and hunting and birds, wild game, whatever, is often you often get this overlay from people on podcasts like myself who say like, "Oh, it's just about being outside," and that is a part of it. But let's be honest, if you are it's funner to catch fish when you go fishing. It's funner to find pheasants when you get in a field. It's funner to find game whenever you go hunting. And if you enjoy it, you're going to want to keep going. So yes, part of that ongoing learning process is being successful, with success being identified as being able to bring something home and cook it. Right. And so he being my father-in-law, he sort of exposed me to it, and I just fell in love. The idea of being outside, the idea of being in this beautiful place, the idea of providing myself with my own protein that I liked or whatever, I loved. So that time, I decided, look, this is something that I wanna pursue. Now, I had didn't grow up in Southern Indiana hunting at all, nothing like that. I had no clue how to sight in a rifle. I had no clue to where to go to sight in a rifle, what type of rifle to get. I didn't know any of that. And so there was this immense uphill battle. And what I hope with that story, what I hope that people who are listening to this hear is that it's doable. You can go from complete ground zero at the age of, your late 20s, early 30s to learning and really loving this with some time intentional and some time and some intentional effort. But once I discovered it and started pursuing it, man, I fell in love. And just like my curiosity of seeing some success with my weight, nutrition, and my, fitness, only desiring and driving my desire to want more of that. The same was true of hunting. It was like the more exposure that I got to it, the more I just wanted to do it more.
Mhm.
And obviously, the more time in the field, the more that you learn. But yeah, once I had that exposure, going from a kid in Southern Indiana who knew none of that stuff, didn't know how to navigate the mountains, didn't know. I mean, there's so many little things that you do naturally as someone who grows up in it that you don't think about. I mean, even as far as like how to get on a ridge, how to get up the hill, where do you glass from, where do mule deer live, those type of things. And I have several people to thank for that, and a smaller group from among those several who I owe all of that to, and I will be and feel tremendously indebted to probably for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
For teaching me, for being willing to say, you know what, you're going to slow us down. We're going to be teaching you a lot more than we're going to be hunting, but it's worth it to us because I think they could see that I really wanted to know it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, those that are farther along in hunting, older generation, they can often see that, that ember, if you will, that needs to be fanned into flame, and someone else that's like, "Oh, this person, they are worth investing in," because I can just see that this is something that they're just falling more and more in love with, and so that's probably they I'm sure saw that in you. I think that's man, it's a fantastic, story and genesis story of you as a hunter, and, albeit an unconventional way, I can relate to that a lot where I didn't grow up hunting either. I was in a hunting family in the sense that my brother hunted, my dad hunted a little bit as well, but I tell people I was a very indoorsy kid, as a youngster. I think I probably had that innate desire, like you said, to explore those places and to live a lifestyle like that, but I just at least when I got older and I was in my 20s, probably, I feel like that really started to take off, like, that desire on the inside of me, and my very first church that I ever worked at, there was a handful of guys that they went to Northwest Colorado every year to elk hunt, and I approached them one year and I said, "Hey, you okay if I just tag along with you guys and I'm just gonna fish and hike and I've never been out west and I wanna just see all that out there." And they were so gracious. They said, "Absolutely, come with us." And I'll never forget, man, like the second day somebody kills an elk out there. This is in archery season. And so they're like, "Hey, Danny killed an elk. We're gonna go help him pack it out." I was like, "Cool, let's go help him pack it out." I didn't even really know what, all that was about either. But we get up there and I'll never forget, man, like, we were coming down the mountain, and he had that dead head, just you like, where it's just basically the antlers and just kind of the top cap, of the bull hanging off the back, and it just was like, it was almost just like I mean, I can probably almost take you back to the exact spot where that was, on that mountain, and this switch just flipped for me where it's like, I've gotta do this." So I started you know, talking to, other men at my church, about all this and researching. I went and got me a bow, started hunting just everything in Indiana that I can. And so if it's got a season on it in the state, I've probably done it in some form or fashion. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely not something that was a part of me, until much later, but it has completely changed my life, and for so many good reasons, and, I'm just so thankful for that, um, those times that I can get out there, that respite, the syncing up that I can do, with the earth and the rhythm of the world and, just all the things that I feel like God has just created for us just to be, attuned to, um, and, yeah, but as you know, and as I know that physical fitness is a uh, optimal physical fitness is a big component of that for you to be able to not only enjoy it, but probably puts more of the odds in your favor of experiencing success while you're out there. Um, and it creates confidence. And one of my kind of things that I kind of live by is that if you're like confidence is lethal. Like if you are a confident person, your odds, I think, of just going farther and staying longer and that kind of stuff that we like to say, it just goes up dramatically whenever, you can just operate from a sense of confidence, and I think that physical fitness, um, helps achieve that for sure. So kinda transitioning here from your journey to your connection to the land, into hunting, and that lifestyle that is just very much a part of you now, um, I guess what I'm trying to get us to is that what role does fitness and health and nutrition, what's kind of the interplay of all those things for, not just Western big game hunters, but bird hunters as well, and just kinda hunting in general when, um, there is, like, I guess, there is a physical fitness to maybe if you're walking really far into a tree stand and you're hauling gear up a tree, but you're stationary for a very long time, but I think what I wanna spend most of our time on is kinda this idea of, like, where there's, like, this endurance aspect, where in the backcountry, when you're hunting sheep or you're hunting elk, or in my case, where you are hunting all day and moving all day with your dog and trying to locate birds and you're on uneven terrain for most of the time. What role does physical fitness and nutrition play, um, in all those things, if that's not too much of a loaded question all at once?
No, I think it can feel like too loaded of a question, but it's not because the answer is this, that in all of those things, they all can vary greatly in their physical demand. But the crossroads where good nutrition and physical fitness intersect them all is it doesn't matter if you're a bird hunter, if you're an Alaskan sheep hunter, if you're an elk hunter in Idaho, if you're a whitetail hunter in Indiana, you are pursuing something you love as a part of your life. It's in most hunters who do anything more than just the casual every 5-year random hunt with a group of guys would consider it a big enough part of their lives that it's worth focusing on.
Mhm.
If you are paying more attention to your nutrition, you're probably going to feel better. And if you feel better and you're using that, you're going to have the energy to do some physical fitness. And if you participate in any amount of physical fitness with consistency over time, the likelihood that you're going to go enjoy these things that you like to do that have some physicality to them is much higher. And that is a motto that we absolutely live by for us, which is, the objective for all of this is these things are hard. We've talked about these Grand Canyon hikes that we do. They're hard. The idea though is not to finish and say, "Oh gosh, I got through that. That was miserable. I don't ever want to do it again." You want to enjoy it. And your physical fitness is not always about weight. Your physical fitness is not always about looking a certain way. Your physical fitness is about your ability to do the things that you like to do without any physical limitations, without it sucking, without you sucking wind, without any of those things. And that could be for somebody who's got grandkids, chasing them around the yard. It could be for bird hunting, it could be for elk hunting, sheep hunting, whatever, you name it. And that's the crossroad. And you and I talked a little bit prior to jumping on here just about the influence of culture and social media and all these things. And it always seems like, the more intense the more anything gets more attention. And so it sort of insinuates, if you're not careful, that to reap the benefits of physical fitness that I'm describing, you've gotta be intense, you've gotta be getting after it, you've gotta be doing the most difficult, hardest, blah, blah. You don't, but you do with both nutrition and physical fitness. You do have to be consistent,
Okay.
regardless of the intensity, regardless of the severity, regardless of the style, regardless of any of that. You do have to be consistent. And that is the number one thing that we struggle with as people is
Sure.
consistency. And part of that consistency that we struggle with is we are unsure if what we are doing is worth doing. And if you have an uncertainty there, of course you're going to hear about something else and be like, well, that seems better than what I'm doing. I'm going to abandon ship and go do this thing. And then sure enough, 4 weeks later, you hear something else that sounds really, really great. And so you abandon ship again and you go do something else. Consistency is having confidence in what you're doing is the right thing. And this goes back to the very kind comments that you gave us about nutrition. That is why we make it so simple. Number one, because it is, but number two, if you can consistently do the basics with your nutrition, you will feel better than you probably ever have.
Sure.
And what we try hard to do is to educate people on why that is. Why is my advice to you what it is? Because if you know that, you're going to be more consistent. You're going to see the benefit from it. And you're not gonna wonder if what this guy on Instagram says is true and you should be buying his product or whatever. You can have the confidence that you need in what you're doing, right? And so, it's a really long-winded way to a great question that you had, but it's all to say that it doesn't matter what your pursuit is. I mean, it seems like chasing sheep in Alaska is the most aggressive, and bird hunters, they're not doing anything that hard, so they shouldn't train. Not true, not true at all. The whole goal for any training is that you can do what it is that you love to do easier. It makes
Mhm.
life easier.
Yeah. And you make a fantastic point too that consistency, as redundant as it sounds, is key. And that's just something that we do not like as humans. Anybody out there that you see on, this platform or that platform, and you're like, man, like, how are they seeing so much success? A lot of that is just all these little micro it's like a precipitous just kinda thing every day, almost like a fountain dripping, where it's like they every day they just showed up, and it's like the phrase that we use a lot, right? I'd rather be occasional or instead of being occasionally great, I'd just rather be consistently good. And that's the hardest thing is just the thing between, our ears, right? Is just showing up every day and doing that thing every day consistently. We want it to be, man, like you said, if we're not just charging hard and doing like this crazy, insane warrior workout, just like um, in kind of insanity culture in the sense of like we think we just have to just feel destroyed at the end of a workout.
And I think the greatest problem with that is, sorry to interrupt you.
No, no, I want you
I
to.
get it. Now you fired me up. The greatest problem with that is that it makes a large percent of the population just feel like they don't wanna get started. They see that and they're like, "Look, if that's what it takes, no thanks." And it doesn't. And that's the problem is, all of this intensity, it doesn't matter. I mean, everything now is like the more intense, the better you are. It doesn't matter if it's training or your nutrition protocol or your finance or your work, right? Oh, like, just grind it out, work 80 hours and sleeps for losers. Yeah, let's talk to those guys in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
It just seems like that's sort of the culture, and that just isn't true in the world of fitness or nutrition. I mean, we haven't really dove into different training types and styles, etc. But I will tell you that what we see across the board is that when people start training smarter, they get more with less and less
Mhm.
intensity. Whereas what you will often see is there is no aim or goal in mind for a person who shows up to a gym and they are under the belief of, man, I'll just hammer myself to depth. And that will mean I'm getting fitter. And that's the biggest, farthest thing from the truth.
Mhm.
Right? So, more is not always better, smarter is better, and you've gotta have a plan for that. And to have a plan for that, you have to understand why it is what you're doing, or you'll never be consistent. You'll start hearing all of these things that have a dose of logic to them, and that dose of logic will make it sound really convincing, so you'll chase it. You'll think, "Oh, it's gotta be better than what I'm doing, 'cause I'm not really seeing a whole lot," and you'll chase it. So, you know the confidence of knowing why you do stuff instead of just doing it is also holds immense value.
So let's kind of jump into a twofold kind of thing here approach to um let's say somebody they're getting ready to go to let's use your state for example. They're going to Idaho and they are hunting chuckers. And they're going to throw in some mountain grouse and there as well. Um what from a nutritional aspect, um I know that nutrition means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. Some people, um, I know they use their hunting, vacations as time to splurge, and they're gonna eat that brownie or that oat milk cream pie. Others are very rigorous, and they're gonna lean more towards, like, uh, the I don't know, a Cliff Bar, for example, is, like, something that comes to mind for me or whatever, but, and really try to stick to that diet, maybe that they're holding to, throughout the rest of the year. But what is let's do this. So, like, prepping for the hunt, during the hunt, and then after the hunt, and we can even kinda get, like, into fats and proteins and carbohydrates if you want. All that stuff's very interesting to me as well, of how all that stuff can influence, a hunt with energy and satiety and those kind of things. What would be for a strenuous bird hunt, whether it's, like I said, chuckers in Idaho, traversing across the prairie in Kansas, trying to find prairie chickens and prairie grouse, what, what's some stuff that comes to mind for you of, like, a good way to fuel up on the front end, during, and then even in post, if there's anything that comes to mind for you in post as well?
Well, I think that I mean, so a good place to start would be during, right? And the country that Chucker lives in here, we've hunted in for big game, and I know some guys that are religious Chucker hunters, and those can be more strenuous than chasing elk. I mean, that country's no, that's not easy. From a general standpoint, whether it's Chucker or like you're talking about with grouse or big game or anything, the name of the game, the biggest rule of thumb, the biggest place that people falter is they're either not eating enough or they're not eating regularly enough while on that hunt to continue to hunt as hard through the duration of the hunt. Right. And so what typically happens when you're moving that much without much rest is you're slowly depleting your stores. And if you're not replacing them, the intensity, the attention, the awareness, the intentionality of the movement, the quality of the movement all declines. There's nothing there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different than whenever you get ready to go on a road trip and all of a sudden you got a quarter tank of gas and you just keep the floor, just keep the gas pedal down, keep blowing by the exits and hope it gets you there, knowing it's not going to get you there. So, name of the game, and we simplify this by saying two things: totals and timing. You need to be sure that you're eating enough totals. You need to be sure that you're eating with enough frequency, timing to stay fueled through the duration of the hunt. You should feel as strong at the end of that hunt as you did in the beginning if
Mm.
you're trained for it. You can nail the nutrition, but if you're not trained for it, you will get tired, which again goes back to my statement earlier of, your physical training is makes life easier from the standpoint of these hunts aren't difficult if you've been training for them. But yeah, if you get off the couch and you go for your first one and it's covering a lot of mileage and a lot of elevation on canyon land in Idaho chasing chucker, you're going to get tired, right?
Mhm.
Nutrition is not going to fix that. Now, if you're talking about before the hunt, we could talk about, let's say that it's the day before the hunt or the morning of the hunt. You're going to want to be sure, and this can vary. So let me back up. This can vary because if a guy is pretty on top of his nutrition, your body's going to do a great job of tapping into the fuel reserves that it needs in the beginning to where you may not even need to eat before you get going. And you can begin that totals and timing ongoing eating throughout the duration of the hunt after you've been hunting for a little bit. Anymore, even hunting big game, we may wake up and start moving and then not really eat breakfast until 10 a.m. Sit down to glass, sun's been up for a while. We'll sit down and have breakfast then because we're on top of our fueling the rest of the time. Now, if a person's not on top of their fueling, they could benefit from some fuel earlier in the mornings. And depending on the intensity of the hunt is largely going to be depending upon what you decide to fuel with. The greater the intensity, and I would define intensity by total mileage, by total elevation, by how hard your heart is having to work. Um, so the greater the intensity, the more your body's and your muscles going to be requiring and relying on carbohydrate as fuel. So you're going to want some source there for your body to use up as a fuel source. One of the greatest points of confusion that we hear from people is, I want to take lots of protein. Protein's great fuel. Protein is not great fuel. Protein is a nutrient designed to recover and repair the worn muscle tissue that you've got. It should never be used as fuel.
Yeah.
So if you're eating piles and piles and piles of protein, it's not fueling you. Now, the body is remarkable in the sense that it can take that protein and convert it into fuel via a longer processing in the liver to make sure that you don't suffer the consequences of a silly excision, but it is not designed to be a fuel source.
Yeah.
So the types of food you bring in alignment with the intensity or duration of the hunt itself will largely determine how you feel on that hunt. You can bring a pile of calories, but if those calories do not contain the right type of fuel sources to match the intensity of what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you've got a backpack full of calories, you will not feel good, right? So that overlap of messaging will matter. If you go on a South Dakota pheasant hunt for 5 days with a group of friends, you'll be fine day one because you're exhausting the stores that you came into the hunt with. But by day five, if you're not staying on top of these things, you're gonna, everybody else may go out and you may be like, man, I don't know that I can. I'm feeling pretty whipped.
So, let me kinda dive into that a little bit, everything there's a lot of great information. Protein is like you said, it is meant for muscle repair, it's meant for recovery. Um, it is a and it also produces, like, satisfaction in our stomach or satiety, is what that would be called. So it's a slow burning, basically, thing in our system. What am I accurate in saying that? And if that's the case, it's not like giving us in the moment, during the hunt, that quick energy hit that we need to keep kinda cruising along at a certain speed or pace, to feel comfortable. Am I off on that, or am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I could be getting lost in semantics, but it's not a slow burning sense. So, an example of a slow burning fuel source would be a complex carbohydrate. And a complex carbohydrate takes, if you think of those old, like at the holidays, those Dutch dolls where it starts as like one doll and then you screw the top off and it's a smaller one, screw the
Sure.
top off and it's a smaller one, right? So it's this series of little dolls that fit inside of it makes this big doll. Complex carbohydrates are processed in that way. And so, in a sense, you would take that little doll and use a bit of fuel and stuff it in the bigger one, and then use a little bit of fuel and stuff it in until it's processed in entirety. Now, the language we usually use is a chain link. And so, when you eat a complex carbohydrate, it is a slow delivering fuel because you take this long chain link, and as your body needs it, it gives you a single link but then leaves the rest of the chain intact. Then
Yeah.
gives you another single link and leaves the rest of the chain intact until that whole chain is used up over hours. That's a slow burning fuel. Protein should never be any kind of fuel that your muscles are using. So in that sense, it's not it's not whether it's slow or fast. It should never be used as a source of fuel. Now, dietary fat can be used as a source of fuel, but if you're doing something with high intensity and high intensity defined as your body is trying to operate on the upper end of its threshold, you're panting, you're breathing hard, it's challenging, right? When it's higher intensity, the body is using almost always 100% carbohydrate as fuel. If it's lower intensity, walking across a flat prairie, pretty easy, it will use some fat as fuel. You may not need as many carbohydrates,
Okay.
right? So I may be getting lost in the semantics of your definition and trying to say protein's a slow processing fuel source by saying protein should never be a fuel source,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah. So, so on these bird hunts then, what take us through, like, what are some ideal carbohydrate sources then? And let's talk specifically too about, like, not necessarily just, like, cookies or, some of the things that maybe we reach for, like, when we're back at our camp or whatever and everybody's hanging out. But if someone's, like, wanting to be very conscientious about, um, very wholesome, good, at least even quasi good, energy sources while they're on the hunt, what would be some of those carbohydrate examples? And does protein and I'll add this into, like, does protein even at the end of the day, for your final meal before you go to bed, does it ever play a place, or should it not even be necessarily a concern on those handful of days while you're out on the hunt?
So remind me, and we'll come back to the second part of that after I
Sure.
answer the first part of your question. So whether something is good or quasi good, etc., is largely going to be determined by that person. Here's what I mean by that. When you're moving a lot, your body is demanding that blood goes to the legs for recovery and it is pooling blood from the gut for digestion. So, your ideal, quote, good food that you would normally think is just such a great idea and healthy at home may not sit well with you on a hunt because there's no blood flow to the gut. So now something that looks like a child's Halloween candy box becomes a good fuel source because your body can handle it and it delivers fuel to you quick. So you go
Mhm.
back to my analogy of a long chain link and you're slowly breaking off links of this chain and you've got the rest of it there for complex sources. The other type of carbohydrate source that we have is simple carbohydrates. And this would be like me showing up to your house with a big bucket of just single chain links that have never been put into a chain itself. It's just individual links. Those are processed almost immediately. That is excellent when you're moving a lot, right? And so part of this conversation of what's good and what's bad is largely determined by the individual. Your list may be different than my list because what sits well in your belly doesn't sit well in my belly, and
Mhm.
vice versa. What sits well in my belly may not sit well in your belly. So, an individual tolerance based on those things is what's going to determine that list. Now, I'll humor the question because I understand what you're saying. Like, okay, well, what are some good fuel sources? Something like oatmeal in the morning, right? Generally high in fiber, predominantly a slow digesting carbohydrate. There's not a lot of added sugar to it. That would be fine. But again, like, you've listened to quite a bit of episodes on our podcast, which I appreciate. Thank you for doing that. You know that my MO, my messaging is always there are no good and bad foods. It's always the dose that makes the poison. And context matters. What is normally good on a hunt is not something I'd eat sitting at my desk. I'm not going to eat gummy bears sitting here in my office. But gummy bears could save my tail if I'm chasing an elk and haven't eaten breakfast in a while. The idea of, and this is common phrasing in marathon running and triathlons and all these other sports. The idea of hitting a wall is very real in bird hunting and Western hunting and anything where you're moving that much. And hitting a wall is where you've been moving so much without eating that you just end up having nothing in you. And you've got to stop at that point. If you're on birds though, or if you're on an elk, that's not happening. You're gonna keep moving. And being able to pull these single chain links out and get immediate fuel saves you. Whereas a Cliff Bar or a bowl of oatmeal, you're not getting the effects of that fuel until an hour from now.
Hmm.
I mean, right? So the idea of what's good and bad changes. Now, to go to the second part of your question about, is there ever a time when you should be consuming protein on these? Yeah, absolutely. You should, with regular intervals through the day, but especially if you're on a multi-day hunt, getting it in the evening. Ideally, regular intervals, but in the evening for sure, because again, protein is the recovery nutrient. And so you want those muscles to get some protein into them so they can recover and be good on day 2 and day 3 and day 4, etc. So you're not only eating gummy bears throughout this deal. Ideally, you're going to have a good meal plan, a good strategy for your food going into these hunts as to when you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, the composition of those meals, etc.
Okay. Yeah. Makes perfect sense, and I appreciate you breaking all that down. And what I'm hearing you say is that so someone that's wanting to be health conscientious is on a hunt where there's a ton of demand and you need a quick hit of energy. It's full permission, if you will, on that person or for that person to feel like they can, "Man, I can eat that candy bar because what I need right now is I need fast, quick energy, that's gonna be able to metabolize quickly, and kinda get me over that hump." Uh, Gummy bears, I know that's something that you reference to a lot, like, on your podcast. That's kind of like, where you have some clients that are just like, "I can't believe you would eat gummy bears," whatever, and it's like what you say, it's a dose that makes the poison. It's not that you're just hammering gummy bears every day and that you're using that as, like, dietary advice for a person that's trying to, like,
Well,
change their life, but go ahead.
it's the dose and it's case use specific, right? So it's kind of like you're saying now, nutrition quality is about as sensitive as a topic as anything else right now. And
Mhm.
so if for some reason it settles a person in their mind to get a box of dehydrated fruit as their fast acting carbohydrate instead of my gummies, then that's fine. It does the same thing, right?
Sure.
Now, your body, human metabolism, when you look at it on a map and how processes in the body works, your body is not like, oh man, thank goodness this is a raisin and not a gummy bear. I'm gonna really improve the quality of your. It doesn't. All it knows is if it's getting fuel or not. So yeah, I mean, as a side tangent, I suppose if you have someone who's trying to improve their overall health and they feel like they are going they're taking a step back by allowing gummy bears even on this hunt in this case use, then yeah, try to figure out a more natural source that you're okay with, not because it's going to harm or help you, but it's going to help you stay in that mentality of what you're going to continue on once the hunt is done,
Yeah.
right? When you go back home and try to continue to lose weight or improve your health. And that's part of the consistency thing too, is like sometimes it's just about staying in the rhythm. So you're not making a choice based on the direct or immediate effect it's gonna have with you. It's more of just staying in the mentality of, "Oh, yeah, I'm trying to be a healthier person. I hear him, but, I'm gonna take some dried bananas rather than taking these gummy bears just because I wanna stay in that mentality of I'm really trying to improve my nutrition." That's 6 to 1, fine with that.
Okay, so let's talk about, the hydration aspect of things. Um, I don't know how many bird hunters can relate to this, and or even Western game hunters like yourself. Um, Without fail, during bird season, so many times I'll be, at home at night, I'll be on the couch, I'll be laying in bed, and I will take some of the most awful cramps in my legs that you have ever experienced. I've tried a lot of things, as far as trying to mitigate that issue. Um, I feel like I stay fairly hydrated, and try to take care of that as best as I can, most days, but it just seems like that the even on those more hydrated days, I still can be very susceptible to those cramps, and I have to think, whether a bird hunter is busting through frozen cattails in South Dakota, they're trudging up, a mountainside in search of chukar, especially when it's colder out, we just naturally don't think to hydrate as much even though our body is still demanding that. Um, so would you have any advice as far as, like, rehydration, and even, like, kinda hydration on the front end or during? I guess it's kinda just as like what we were talking about with food as well. but some hydration tips, where I will say, like, for me, one of the annoying things is, like, I don't wanna have to feel like I have to stop and take a restroom break all the time. Like, I wanna be able to, like, keep going, but I feel like at the same time, then you kinda pay for it in the end because I'm taking these cramps. So, yeah, so what are your thoughts on hydration and that kinda stuff?
It's the same as anything, which is remembering. That's, you can give all of these tips, you can do all of this, but most people that I have found are like you in that they don't wanna stop. They don't wanna stop, or they don't wanna pee, or they don't wanna whatever until it comes to now you have these things manifesting themselves that are forcing you to stop. So for most people, it's not because they're not getting a certain ounces per hour or milliliters per minute. The recommendations for sports performance hydration are uh there's the way that they issue them are so silly that they're unapplicable to most people. For example, 6 to 8 ounces every 15 minutes. Are you going to time yourself for a 6-hour day every 15 minutes, set an alarm, and make sure you're drinking 6 to no. So the general rule that I give people is, look, bring along with you a tiered bottle of some kind, whether that's a water bottle or an Nalgene bottle or two 16.9-ounce water bottles that you pulled out of a 24 Schnucks pack or whatever, and give yourself a goal to drink to a certain amount from morning to lunch and from lunch to evening, and make it your goal that these have to be done. The frequency in which you do that is up to you, but again, the thing that I have found is people not that people don't know a number or target to aim for, they don't wanna stop, or they don't wanna pee, or the bottle's hard to reach. That's one tip, like, make it easy to access. If it's in your pack and drinking means you've gotta stop, take your pack off, unzip your pack, pull it out of the bottom, take a sip, put it back, you're not gonna wanna do that.
Right.
So make it accessible. Put it in your cargo pocket if you've got one. We wear, these hunting packs when you're hunting Western big game, 'cause a lot of times you're backpacking for a couple of days, and they have a Nalgene holster on 'em. So you'll have a Nalgene that's easily accessible over here, or you could put a water bladder in it. And years ago, those didn't exist. You just had this, like, little bitty, stash pocket hanging off the back of the bag that you had to articulate your arm around to get out, and you couldn't, right? And so, like, that meant you had to stop and pull it off. I wasn't stopping. I'm not gonna stop and do that, like, it's inconvenient to do anyway. So, accessibility to your food and accessibility to your hydration is an absolute key and underrated for getting it in too, right? And so, we as people really like to focus on the nuances. You commented on this earlier, and you're so right. Give me the perfect ratio of carbs and the perfect ratio of macros and the perfect ratio of this. And to be honest with you, what I find in the professional work that we do is that's not people's problem. It's strategies to get that in that is people's problem. I
Mhm.
forget to pack it, or they're not eating it, frequently enough, or it's the wrong mix of things, or it's inaccessible. It's in their pack and stuffed under all this stuff, or my personal favorite is, "Oh, it's just hunting, it's not that important, is it?" It's like, "Oh, I guess if you're going out for a day, it's not, but if you're doing some of these longer trips, you wanna feel as good on day 5 as you did day 1, that sheep hunt I did was 12 days, and so nutrition became not just important, like, pretty critical. If I wanted to go for 12 days, I
Right.
needed to be sure that I was on top of stuff, every day, and so, yeah, like everything you ask me and most of my answers, it's a really long-winded way of saying I think accessibility and remembering is probably more important on the hydration front than these really nuanced calculations of certain ounces per hour.
Yeah, yeah. That's really good, and just having structure in place to make it as convenient as possible is going to increase the odds more than anything that you're actually going to do the thing. Um, yeah, and so Well, would you say anything too about, like, specifically for the cramps, and I'm asking if anything, just for myself, 'cause like I said, I feel like even on the days that I hydrate pretty darn well, I'm still very susceptible to those. So is there something maybe to be said for salt, sodium, on the front end and the back end, that maybe I'm deficient in, or magnesium or something like that
Well,
that's causing that?
that's really gonna be dependent upon each individual and their sweat rate, right? And so
Okay.
we all sweat in different circumstances. We all lose varying amounts of electrolytes as a result of that sweat. The season you're hunting in is going to determine that. And what you're eating contains some electrolytes too. So, the blanket expectation for people from me is, oh yeah, you need to replace sodium, you need electrolytes. Well, maybe not always. You could, doesn't hurt, easy thing to try. Any excess nutrients that you get from an electrolyte, you're going to pee out. Most of them are water soluble. Most of them are inexpensive. You've got, from the most bougie of like a tailwind product that marathoners use to something like Element, which has really, really high salt levels but no carbohydrates in it, to Gatorade. The big orange thing that we all grew up and you mix in a tub and you take a bottle out with you when you go. You can use any mixture of those things, and they all range from having pretty minimal salt to really high salt, to where the point of like some people struggle to get in Element because it's so salty. It's 1,000 milligrams per serving, and that can be a heavy dose. What I have found, although the electrolyte question is definitely relevant, and I would say, yeah, for sure, if you're sweating a lot and you're a guy who sees salt rings around his shirt and his hat after he is doing something really physical, there's reason to believe it's worth throwing some kind of electrolyte that contains salt in. But the second piece, and this goes back to the origins of our conversation, is, are you training? Because if you got all the hydration on the planet and you got all the sodium on the planet, but you're asking something of your muscles that are beyond what it's usually doing, it will cramp.
Mhm.
So that is the other piece of training where it's like, oh, I don't, I'm just a bird hunter. I don't need to train. And then my comment was, well, sure you do, because training makes everything easier. And this is a great example where it's like the physicality of your hunt may not seem like it demands training. But what if I told you that if you're a guy who cramps all the time, that training meant no cramps? And all of a sudden you're going through hunts with no cramps. I
Mhm.
would think that 10 out of 10 guys who have cramps would say, "Yeah, that's a more enjoyable hunt. That's funner."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it very well could be a training piece of it. Now, we haven't talked a lot about training yet, but a very key element of training is specificity. So if you are planning a certain kind of bird hunt in a certain kind of environment, and your training in your mind is doing a lot of heavy weightlifting, and you go on this bird hunt, you will still cramp. Yes, you were physical, but that physicality was not specific to what you're doing in the field,
Mhm.
right? So specificity in how you train should align with the type of hunt you plan to do to really get those two line up. Now, going back to my comments from earlier, the intensity still doesn't need to be crazy.
Mhm.
But if you're planning on walking a lot, but you invest a lot of time doing bench presses, that's not going to do a lot for you when you're walking.
Yeah.
So you may look great, but it's not going to do much for your legs. So the specificity of training and trying to reduce the frequency of these cramps can matter.
Okay. Yeah, and that's definitely what I wanted to get into kinda in this next piece is, the type of training that we need to do, whether it's bird hunting, whether it's Alaskan, sheep, is to be able to train in a way to where our body can pull from our strength over a long period of time. Does that sound right? Like where, um
Endurance.
endurance, I guess, is what we're talking about. Because big muscles, like I wrote a piece back in earlier this year about hunting prairie chickens on the plains, and I wrote in there that big muscles don't kill birds. It's a body that has an ability to be able to efficiently manage oxygen through the body, like, or what's also known as VO2 max. That's what's going to help you to effectively hunt for a long period of time where you're not just winded and gassed the entire time. So, am I off on that, or would you have something even kinda more specific? And then what are maybe some very attainable at home, a handful of workouts, where, somebody maybe they've got a 12-hour a day job, a 10-hour a day job, it's time at the gym, and and they're juggling kids and marriage and other responsibilities, and time at the gym maybe is not so much of a reality for them every day, and they get maybe just this, handful of days or a week or whatever that they get to go do their bird hunt, and they wanna feel the best that they can possibly feel. What's maybe uh, some workouts that they can do at home, maybe even 10, just 15 minutes that can, put them in a much better place, you know? So I know I kinda asked 2 questions there, but, like, is my definition right? And then what are some exercises that a person could do too?
Yeah, I mean, your definition is pretty close, right? And so like a really good definition between what people would commonly understand would be the difference between endurance and strength is with endurance training, you are trying to build a resiliency against fatiguing over time, your ability to do work over time. Strength, on the other hand, is building your resilience against and or doing work momentarily. So maximum effort, very little time,
Okay.
lots of time, not necessarily maximal effort. And that's where people get mixed up in this whole messaging of like, I'm just going to go murder myself and hope that it improves it. Really, in building endurance, what you're doing is you are, and this makes it challenging for the second part of your question, is you're doing things at a fairly steady, stable, almost easy pace for long periods of time.
Okay.
That's how you build endurance. And so that's going to be really tough to do for the guy who's only got 10 minutes. Now, all is not lost. We'll get back to the guy who's only got 10 minutes in a minute. But ideally, if you're trying to build endurance, you are doing things that are not so easy that you could do it with your grandparents, maybe, but not so difficult that you feel like you need to stop after 10, 15, 20 minutes. You're looking for this pace that seems really, really intentional, really methodical. You're moving with an intention, but you're not wearing yourself out. In fact, if I
Exactly.
were with you, we could talk to each other. And what you're working on building over that time is time on your feet, right? And so
Exactly.
that's going to slowly help you develop more endurance. Now, as a part of that, every now and then you want to incorporate something that's a little more challenging, a little higher intensity. And we're not even talking about strength, we're talking solely about your heart and your lungs here, right? Your ability to be able to build that up over time. And as a part of that, you would want to incorporate some sort of strength a couple times a week. And that strength being driven towards um, facilitating what you're trying to do on your feet versus just building strength for strength's self. And here's what I mean by that. The strength training focus is built on building up that endurance to where you don't tire over time. It's not about getting bigger muscles. I don't care how much you squat. It's not about moving a lot of weight. It's circuitry, right? So you develop like a circuit, let's say, and you're trying to build a resistance from the muscle fatiguing over time versus brute strength in one sitting.
Mhm.
That's different than strength training, if that makes sense. Does
Mhm.
that make sense, the difference there?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So a good training program for building endurance is going to be endurance itself. You're doing things that are fairly easy pace for longer periods of time that build over time. You're also doing something that's a little more challenging than that pace very occasionally, and you're doing strength to aid in the prevention of injury and building endurance as well. So it's not strength for moving, brute strength's sake. It is doing strength for the sake of building endurance and in building up a resistance in your muscle from fatiguing over time versus a short period of time, if that makes sense.
Okay. So the strength training that you would occasionally do is kind of like creating like a fortress, if you will, or like kind of like a house almost around. It's like you said, it's facilitating that time that you're on your feet. So I guess what comes to mind for me is like core strength, for example. It's not necessarily, am I right on that? Where it's not necessarily like these long on your feet, typical trainings that you would do, but it's still very crucial to have core strength as we have our packs on our back, as we're am I off on that, or am I kinda getting off
You're
in the
not
weeds a
off on
little?
it. So I'll give you an example. If you do like a what we call a muscular endurance circuit, and a muscular endurance circuit would be like, let's say it's these series of exercises that do have weight in it, but might be on the higher repetition end of things, right? So for building strength, you may only do 7 or 8 reps, and it may be for 3 to 4 sets of the most you can do, right?
Mhm,
This could be, let's say that you do a round, multiple rounds of these dumbbell step ups on a box, and then you do lunges, and they're just back to back to back. You are building a resilience against your muscle tiring out over time by doing these, right? And
mhm,
so that would be like a circuit. And
okay,
so it's twofold. One, you are trying to build up a fortress, as you say, against your muscle tiring out from effort over time. But you are also wanting to build the muscle that is around the joints that are taking the most abuse. So if you think about your knees hurting and your ankles hurting and all of these things, these joints that are hurting, a lot of times that is because the muscles are tiring out. And so those joints begin to misalign because your legs are getting weak, and so
mhm,
your knee starts to go out to the side, and 2,500 steps of that, it starts to ache. And so part of this muscular endurance element of building endurance is you're trying to build the muscles that support the joints so that they can support this constant ongoing use all day long. And
yes,
those joints continue to fire in the plane of direction that you want. Right. And so
right,
the difference between this, if you're talking about strength alone, the difference between building pure brute strength is your ability to move weight in a single moment versus building muscular endurance is your ability to continue to move weight over and over and over and over and over again. And
mhm,
so the two styles in which you would train those would be different.
yes, okay. So, give us a couple what's whether this is at the gym where someone that has plenty of time maybe to do these, or even if it's just something that's outside going for like something that I love to do is long distance running. Um, what are some maybe a couple things as far as just endurance training that bird hunters can do, and then what's maybe a couple things as far as strength training to facilitate that endurance training, that we could take away?
So what I would say too is going back to the guy who's only got 10 minutes. I would create, and we have some examples of this online. I would create a muscular endurance circuit, and I would do that for 10 minutes, a couple times a week. And I would document the weight that I use when I do that. I
Mhm,
would document the number of rounds that I do. So you have a series of exercises, and that series would make up one round. And so for the first week, you would choose a weight and you would do one round. The second week, you would do 2 rounds. The third week, you would do 3 rounds. At the fourth week, I would increase that weight and go back to 2 rounds. So you're progressively increasing, which is allowing you to increase your strength. So that guy who's only got 10 minutes, that's what I would do. What I would also do for that guy is I would look at my calendar and ask myself, is there anywhere that I can make time for this other stuff? Can I
yeah,
go for a couple of walks at work? Can I, does my work have a flight of stairs? Am I normally scrolling on my phone for my 15-minute break? Can I take that 15-minute break now and go do flights of stairs for 15? Do something. And that is what's going to matter more than anything. Right? I mean, you can't create time where you don't have it, but it's very, very likely that if you do an audit of your time, you can make better use of it. And so that's what I would say. You may not be able to go to the gym because you're committed to a job for 12 hours. And my question would be, what do you have at your job that you can use in a couple of 15-minute blocks. That's 30 extra minutes per day, 150 extra minutes per week that you weren't doing. That's big. That's impactful. For the guy who has an abundance of time and he can break away to the gym, I would find a way to increase my time over time. If I have a hunt that I know is coming up in 12 weeks, I'm going to go from 12 weeks out and scale backwards and basically say, look, I'm going to start with 60 minutes on Saturdays. Over the next 12 weeks, I want to add 10, 15 minutes per day to that 60 minutes for 12 weeks until I get ready to go on my hunt.
Okay.
That's increasing the amount of time on your feet slowly. So that progressive nature is important, and it's a very stair-stepped continuum, right? So you don't just go from, "I'm gonna go to 60 up to 120 in a week," because now it's like you got a long time between your hunts, no more time to dedicate, and so you lose that performance because you don't really know what to do. Having that plan that's progressive in nature can be extremely helpful. And even for that guy, I would say at least twice a week doing the same muscular endurance style of circuit.
And I'm sure that can manifest itself in many different ways, but, you use, like, the guy that's only got 10 minutes, he's taking that time and doing some flights of stairs at work. But I guess, like, what are some of these endurance workouts? Is it going for long runs? Is it, rucking? Is it, lunges and dumbbell step-ups? Is it box jumps? Like, I
So
mean, go ahead.
there's 2 there, right? So you've got endurance, which is what you would think of as cardio or running like you're describing, and that's where I'm saying I would work on increasing time. The
Okay,
modality that you use, whether it's on a bike or it's swimming in a pool or it's running or it's hiking or it's walking or it's rocking or it's whatever, doesn't matter. As long as it puts you in an as long as it puts you at an intensity that is more difficult than sitting in a chair, but not so difficult that you can't complete the amount of minutes that you've written out for it. That's what you're looking for, right?
got it.
Fairly
Yep,
easy, conversational pace. People call it zone 2. You could rank it at a 2 out of 5 on difficulty. Call it whatever you want. You're not trying to smoke yourself, but you're not wanting to sit in a chair either. Should be challenging, but not so challenging that you need to stop, right? You're trying to increase time in that instance. The box step up sort of muscular endurance side of things that you're asking about is separate, but both of those are a part of a cohesive plan.
yeah,
And so with any hunt training, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the different elements of that hunt and train them individually in a very smart way. That's the specificity that we talked about earlier. So on any given hunt, you may be climbing, you may be walking on flat ground for a while, you may be doing all of these different stepping over logs or whatever. You may be doing all of these things at one time, and so you are trying to train them in a very specific way,
okay,
right? And so that circuit could be, for example, you may do 8 step ups with the weight in your right hand on your right leg. Then you may do 8 step ups with weight in your left hand on your left leg. You would then immediately go into 8 goblet squats. You may then immediately go into 8 lunges on the right side, and then 8 lunges on the left side, and then go immediately into 2-minute box step overs, and then go immediately into Bulgarian split squats, right? And so you are building a resistance against fatigue from that muscle being used over and over and over and over again. That's different than strength. Strength is, I'm going to move this weight for 10 times and then set it down and take a rest.
yeah,
You don't do that in hunting ever,
right,
ever.
right.
You're building a resistance to the fatigue of the repetitive use, and that only happens if you train it.
Okay, makes sense now. Totally get it. Love that definition too of strength. Like, I've never heard it put that way, where it's just like I'm moving this in this isolated moment.
And that's great if your goal is to build strength.
Mhm.
But again, specificity is king. So if you're trying to accomplish a certain outcome in for the mountains, you have to train that outcome. You can't bench and expect to hike good.
Right.
And 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 I think for a lot of people, that message gets lost because it's like, if I go into a gym and I'm doing something active for 45 minutes, I'm getting fitter. You may be getting healthier, right, than if you were sitting on a couch, but that does not mean it will translate into a better hunt and more physical ability either.
100%. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Which is hard for us to hear too, I think specifically as men, because we just think like, "Oh, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna deadlift, and I'm gonna squat, and I'm gonna bench, and I'm gonna do" how many how high of a poundage of a dumbbell can I do, like, these dumbbell curls, and it's like you said, if that is your goal, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
But hunting is not asking that of you. It's asking way more on the endurance side. So
Yeah,
that
if you're interested in seeing how much you can curl, curls all day.
right.
But I've never curled in the mountains.
Right. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, yeah, man, man, this has been a great conversation. And as we're kind of landing the plane here, let's just I just want to hear about what you got planned for the fall. Any big hunts that you've got, or even just like local hunts that you've got on the docket, and what your plans are.
Yeah, I mean, we're so fortunate in Idaho as resident of Idaho, what we can hunt. So, I'll definitely do the big three, which is, for me, mule deer, elk, and antelope, bear, I guess the big four. We have all of those tags kind of every year, and so we take them, and if we see something, then we try to capitalize on it. But I've got a archery elk tag this year. I had a rifle tag last year. And then honestly, I'm a little bit of a Western anomaly in the sense of like, there's nothing I love hunting more than mule deer. So while I want to and will, get out as much as possible for elk, um, I always look forward to hunting mule deer the most. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens. It's always fun to start the season and not really know what to expect and then go
Yeah.
try to make it happen.
Yeah, that's cool. So, what is it about mule deer that you love so much?
I love the the strategy that you've gotta use to get them. They're so there's a degree there where, like, you've gotta really pick them out, and I feel like once you find them, it's on you, right? It's a lot on you to put yourself in a position to harvest them. Whereas with elk, they're so this is gonna sound so stupid. They're so big and vocal that it's kind of like, yeah, well, they're here. Let's see if we can seal the deal on them. Versus with mule deer, you've got to get up high and you got to use a lot of glass, and you're playing a chess match and truly trying to pick a needle out of a haystack. And you always know that there's something there that you don't see. And so it's just really compelling to want to keep looking, go look at the next drainage. And man, if there's that many does and this many small bucks, there's gotta be a big boy somewhere. And I really want to find him. And so like you're always just I think what it is there's this perpetual idea of there's something I'm not seeing, right? And it just makes you wanna, like, just keep searching for it, and this is true even last year on the mule deer hunt that we had. We went into this area that we were really interested in, and we got up to the top of the ridge and almost immediately started seeing just these really small bucks. There was a group of 3 of them together, and we'd spooked one, and he ran over a ridge, and we saw on the backside of this ridge, big pockets of does coming out at night, and there were cow elk there, just this awesome place. And I glassed this, 4 by 4 up who was just bedded in the shade, taking this nap. It was a beautiful day out, and he just kept dozing, and I went back and forth on, like, whether I was interested in trying to, harvest him or not, and it was just one of those deals where it was like, I just doesn't really I'm just not, like, excited about it, and I don't really have any interest in just shooting stuff. So we kept looking and, we kept looking, kept feeling like there had to be some more deer in there, and so there's this anticipation of what's the morning gonna bring? What's the afternoon gonna bring, right? And so there's just always anticipation. So sure enough, we decided to pass on him. And then the next morning we thought, okay, well, let's see what's over on this other side in the morning. If nothing turns up, we can come back over and see if he's grown any or if he appeals any more to us. So yeah, we hike up this ridge in the morning, and sure enough, there's a couple little bucks making their way back over the ridge, headed to their bed, and with them was this really unique, tall, deep forked 4x4 with a little kicker on the back. And he was very interesting to me, and so, we ended up harvesting him and packing him out. But
Cool.
yeah, I just think with elk, and in full candor and in full transparency, I've struggled more with elk. That could be part of it,
Mm.
is I've just had more luck, success, and enjoyment hunting mule deer. But with elk, it's just kind of like you get up, you look, they're pretty easy to spot. They're either there, they're not. There's not as much of that, like, chess play involved, I
Sure.
guess. And so, yeah, for me, it's, the mule deer side of things has always been a lot more enjoyable and engaging. So that's just been what I've kinda gravitated towards.
Yeah. Well, I wish you the best, man, and hope you have the best mule deer season yet. And dude, I so appreciate you coming on the show today
Yeah,
and help giving us some just some advice, nutrition advice, and exercise advice that I think a whole lot of us as bird hunters can. Well, I know that we can benefit from, and so it just means a ton. And thanks for helping us out, man. Really means a lot.
yeah. Of course, thank you for having me, and I feel like if I look through the questions you sent me, we didn't even cover 5% of them. So if you ever wanna go back for round 2, be fun to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's make it happen, man. So thanks for being on the Upland Social Data today, Kyle. I really appreciate it, man. And yeah, we'll talk soon, man. Thank you for listening to the Upland Social, an extension of the Hunting Effect Podcast Network. Recording and editing of this podcast, plus intro and outro music, was performed by me, Ryan Linton. My aim is that through this episode, you are more equipped and inspired to explore, conserve, and celebrate the upland hunting lifestyle and the beautiful places it takes us. Until next time, whether it's right here or out in the field, we'll talk soon.